PR Connections Radio presents. This podcast is brought to you by LifeWave. Ready to elevate your wellness game? Meet X39 from LifeWave.com. This game-changing patch uses phototherapy to stimulate your skin, enhancing strength and stamina by channeling your body's innate energy. Simply apply it to harness infrared heat, naturally boosting your vitality. Want to learn more? Visit www.lifewave.com/Vern Dixon and step into a healthier, more active lifestyle today.
Welcome back to Breaking the Silence After Midnight. What keeps you up at night? This is the podcast where sleepless thoughts find space to be heard. Now, tonight, we're not here just to stay in the darkness. We are here to talk about what helps us notice even the smallest light when the night feels emotionally heavy. But before we talk about the heavier emotions that can visit us after midnight, let's start with a little light. Recently, my husband and I spent a week in Minnesota treating our granddaughter to a vacation we hope she will never forget. We spent most of our time in the water, swimming pools, water slides, and even a couple of days splashing about in the Mississippi River, all experiences not exactly found in the Las Vegas desert. Throughout that week, we relished in light, laughter, movement, and adventure, memory making. And for the entire week, I slept like a baby. Well, I was apparently meant to personify. Now, as I lay down each night, replaying those moments in my head, I realized how much those joyful memories helped me to drift off to sleep. And then, as you can see in the next slide coming up, during my waking hours, I started wondering, how will my granddaughter tell those stories when she gets older? I could just see her sitting around the campfire with her friends. How will those memories shape her coming of age? Will she be able to reach back for those moments during times of sadness and use them as small lights when emotional heaviness tries to just take over? That question brings us into tonight's reflection, finding small lights in the darkness. When we think about sadness, emotional heaviness, what pains us the most? I believe we have to begin by looking back. So as we move on to the next slide, honestly, I believe most saddening experiences were hidden from me or just held inside. I can count on 3 fingers the times I remember seeing my mother truly sad. It was the passing of her sister, the passing of her mother, my grandmother, and the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And yes, there were other people in our family and our friends that got sick, passed away, or simply disappointed us. But somehow life often seemed to just move on quickly, almost like it was status quo. On to the next death felt like something that oddly happened to like other families. Disappointment, on the other hand, was often handled with anger. Because usually it was we children who were the ones who were doing the disappointing. And looking back, I wonder if that shaped me more than I realized. I mean, even as a child, I had a hard time sleeping. Maybe it was because I was conditioned to just keep things bottled up. I was really just encouraged to not necessarily express my feelings. I felt like I had to be strong before I really was. And that leads me to another reflection. Can I remember a time when I did not want to go to bed because my mind and my heart were unsettled. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it was the fear of missing out. I guess they refer to that these days as FOMO. Maybe it was something that happened at school. Maybe it was like friendship issues. You know how that goes, or family tensions or worries. I don't know how to explain it. At one time or another, it was probably all of that. But one of my biggest deterrents to sleep was earthquakes. Take a look at this next slide. Earthquakes. Growing up in Southern California, it was normal to feel a shake here and there. But the Sylmar earthquake in 1971, some of you out there might remember that one. It truly shook me to the core. I remember just running in terror through the house, and the house just shook, and I was hearing things just crash into the floor. I held on to the door jamb for what felt like an eternity until that rumbling stopped. And then after that, I always slept with an emergency stash of clothes on the end of my bed every single night for years, just in case. And that kind of fear doesn't always leave just when the shaking stops. Sometimes it just waits until the lights go out. So let's look at the next slide. When I think back to my younger years, nighttime seemed to magnify everything. Sadness felt bigger. Worries felt louder. Unresolved problems felt harder to ignore once everything became quiet. And I suppose it did not help that my parents had forbidden me to go see The Exorcist. But guess who snuck out and saw it anyway? Oh my gosh. And again, for years and years, I had nightmares, and I truly believed I was getting possessed in the darkness. Now I can laugh about it, I guess. But back then, it was very real. Sometimes what seemed dramatic in daylight becomes terrifying after midnight. So let's move on to the next slide. As I moved into college, a lot of you may realize my alma mater. Young adulthood, work, relationships, and independence, the way I handled sadness began to change. Although I spent my first semester of college living at home, I know now that one of the best things that I ever did was to move into the dorms after that. Independence never tasted so good, and I never slept better. Maybe it was because my schedule was just jam packed with those challenging classes and marching band. I was so exhausted that almost every night I fell into a deep sleep. But college also showed me something else. I began observing how many of my friends, my peers, dealt with relationships, emotional upheaval, and college related stress. Not only did I observe it, but somehow I became the go to person for advice. So let's take a look at the next slide. I was like Lucy in her therapy booth with a sign over my head that said, the doctor is in. Maybe that came from being conditioned to appear non emotional and level headed as a child. Even in my own relationships, there was always some level of detachment. Now, I'm not saying that that was good or bad, but here's the deal. I was sleeping. I was not taking that stress to bed and allowing it to take over my brain. I was detached. But now when I look back, I can see that some emotional patterns from childhood and young adulthood still show up when the night feels heavy. For example, the need to appear strong, the habit of just overthinking, the fear of disappointing others, the tendency to just suffer in silence. So, as we move on to the next slide, and as many of you may be experiencing, especially if you have children or grandchildren with whom you have regular contact, the problems do not just simply disappear as they get older. And in my case, their dependency may have diminished a little, but has never completely disappeared. Even as grown adults, I often wonder if through my own actions and my involvement in my adult children's lives, I have become the enabler. Possibly in the same way that others were drawn to my steadiness and empathetic nature during college and even in my work environments as a manager. The difference now is that my emotional patterns from those earlier years are not always just brushed off. Sometimes they are internalized. And that may be part of my own routine of sleeplessness. Maybe I lie awake because, regardless of the strategies I use to help myself sleep, like those sleep tapes and counting sheep. No, I never count sheep. I know that those strategies are not going to just magically make the problems disappear in the morning. So the question becomes, when sadness or emotional heaviness visits me after midnight now, what helps me find even a little bit of light in the darkness? Is it prayer, music, journaling, talking to someone, getting out of bed, remembering who I am, or simply allowing myself to feel without judgment? So, as we move to the next slide, for me, this is when I become my own client in my legacy lifestyle coaching work. I remind myself that there are two main mindsets: a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. A fixed mindset assumes that talents, abilities, situations are mostly unchangeable. They say, I'll never be good at math, or I'll never be able to cook. That's a fixed mindset. You either have what it takes or you do not. Things either are what they are and they cannot improve. That's a fixed mindset. Now, a growth mindset, on the other hand, is the belief that abilities, responses, and understanding can improve through effort, through practice, through feedback and persistence. Someone with a growth mindset sees challenges and mistakes as opportunities to learn. Someone with a fixed mindset may avoid challenges out of fear of failure. So, when the night feels heavy, I try to make a plan to respond in a way that allows me to learn and to grow while helping others to do the same. That doesn't mean I pretend that everything's going to be okay. Everything is just fine. I can't pretend that. Neither can you. It means I try not to obsess over how bad things are or just to sink into that whole defeatist attitude. Instead, I ask myself, what is a more realistic and optimistic way to look at the situation? What are the good aspects of the situation? How can I look at this differently? Reframe it. And when I'm able to do that, I can always find a way to slumber. For those of you listening who feel like darkness is heavier than the night, here's my message to you. When you catch yourself in a fixed mindset and there's this voice speaking with limitation, just pause and ask yourself, what else might be going on here? Be on the lookout for the thoughts and reactions that place you in a fixed mindset, and then practice rephrasing them. For example, when you hear yourself thinking, what if I'm not good enough? I'll be a failure. Change it to, well, everyone starts somewhere and successful people do fail along the way. It's a learning experience. Or when you hear yourself thinking, if it's hard, I'm probably just not good at it. Change it to, well, if it's hard, it means I need to just put in a little bit more effort, more practice, get more support. And then when I grow into it, it'll be an achievement. When you hear yourself thinking, if I don't try, I can't fail, so therefore I might as well not do it, and then I could keep my dignity. Change it to, well, if I don't try, I may have already given up on what's possibility. What are the possibilities? And when you hear yourself thinking, it ain't my fault, change it to, well, if I do or if I don't accept whatever part of this is my responsibility, I give away my power. That is one way we began to find light and hope after midnight, not by denying the darkness, but by choosing not to let the darkness be the only voice in the room. Now, as we close and go on to the next slide, I just want to thank you for joining me for this conversation of breaking the silence after midnight. What keeps you up at night? Tonight, as we go full screen, tonight, we reflected on the darkness that can feel heavier than the night, the sadness, emotional heaviness, and memories that sometimes follow us from childhood and into adulthood. But we also made space for something just as important, and that's the possibility of light. Sometimes that light comes through a memory, a song, a prayer, a conversation, or simply a deep breath, or the simple reminder that we don't have to carry our sadness alone. And next time, we will continue this After Midnight journey with episode 4, focusing on life changes that shift our peace, major life transitions, because sometimes what keeps us awake is not only what hurts, it's what's changing, who we are becoming, how relationships are often shifting, and whether we can still find peace in the middle of it all. So until we meet again, be gentle with what rises in the solitude of the night. Keep looking for small lights in the darkness, and always keep breaking the silence.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.